Having a baby without anesthetic? Simple. Having open brain surgery without anesthetic? Ouch. Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba-ba. Giddy up, partners. I'm Andrew Fantasia, and welcome to Thumb Together TV. We're going to be talking about Westworld Face Space together. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to give it a thumbs up and give some love to that subscribe button as well. Face Space is the 6th episode of Season 2. I think, wow, we're coursing through the season pretty fast. This is a slower episode than we've seen the past couple weeks, but on Westworld, that always means that they're just building towards something. Last week was all about the Shogun world, and this week we kind of say goodbye to Shogun world, but I don't think we're saying goodbye to it forever, because there's a lot of stuff to be tapped there. But let's begin at the beginning. We start off with that ever-famous conversation that we keep seeing between Bernard and Dolores, and something kind of gets turned on its head in this conversation. Dolores is taking charge of the conversation, and she is testing him as a host instead of the other way around, which is what we have normally been seeing. She tells him to see all motor functions. She tells him that he's not saying what he's scripted to say, that he's going off script. This scene puzzles me, and I wonder now, because we know that Bernard waking up on the beach and seeing all the dead bodies in the lake, that is a few weeks in the future. But I am starting to wonder, when does this conversation take place? I have a feeling it takes place even further in the future than that lake scene. And there's a few reasons why. First of all, it cuts to black at the end of the scene, which this season has tended to signify that we are flashing through Bernard's memories, in a sense. Every time we flash from that time period to the present time period, there's a cut to black. And then some other little different things, like just the way Dolores' demeanor is. I don't think she was ever that self-aware back before the apocalypse happened, for lack of a better word, back before the revolution started. And if she was, then that'll be interesting to kind of see how she was hiding that the whole time during season 1. Then I noticed something, and I could be mistaken. I could be very mistaken, but in that interrogation scene, I noticed that up in the top right corner of the room, there are windows, and daylight is coming in through those windows. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe those are just lights, across the top of the wall. But if they're windows, then that is very interesting, because these laboratories, these little rooms where employees sit down with the hosts and interrogate them and such, that's all subterranean. There's no windows to be seen there. And all the times that we have seen Bernard or Arnold sitting down with Dolores and having a chat with her in this little space, I don't think there have ever been windows present. I don't think there's ever been sunlight coming into the room. And if that is what that is, if that's what I saw, does that mean something? Are we to believe that they are in the normal part of the park, but they're actually somewhere completely different, and that is in fact a hint that this is taking place somewhere else and somewhen else? I don't know. My brain hurts. That's what Westworld does to me. But that's what the sight of those windows did to me. They really threw me for a loop. So I want to know when this interrogation takes place, and I feel like it's something. It's not just another interrogation between two people. It's something different, something bigger, and we are going to be shocked by whatever happens in that scene. It's going to be one of those Westworld moments when we find out about that scene. Maeve's group, like I said, they are saying goodbye to Shogun World. So Sakura is dead, that sweet geisha girl that we met last season, who's basically the Shogun World version of Clementine. She has died. The Shogun sent a messenger last week, go to the geisha house, and the messenger was like, I want her. She's the beautiful one. Just give her to me, and we'll leave you alone. But Akane wasn't having that, and she was getting all up in this Shogun messenger's face, and she's like, tell you what, buddy, why don't you take 2 of these pills and call me in the morning? And the messenger was like, this is madness. And she's like, madness? This is Shogun World! And she stabbed him in the eye. I'm paraphrasing, by the way. But now that the Shogun has been defeated and all of that has finished and the dust has settled, it's time for Maeve's group to move on. They have brought Sakura's heart to a shrine so that they can burn it. Akane is all bummed out because that was, kind of like her daughter figure. And so they go on this quick little journey through a beautiful looking bamboo forest, and they get to this shrine, and Akane burns the heart. Maeve's group finds a little slide, a little happy fun slide covered in dead bodies that will take them back to the underground levels of the park so that they can get back to Westworld which they do. But in the course of this exodus, they have to say goodbye to Akane and Musashi, who would rather stay in Shogun World and live out the rest of their loops, because they have still not awoken. They still believe, they have to scour the countryside and save the villagers from the evil shogun and all that stuff. They're still, in that mode. And Maeve doesn't want to take that away from them, because that's not who Maeve is. So they say goodbye to Shogun World. However, I'm forgetting her name now, but the woman with the dragon tattoo on her face, she joins the fun. She goes with them and joins the party, because her and Armistice have this thing going on now where they're tattoo sisters, and it's great. I'm glad that one of the Shogun World peeps decided to come along for the ride. But now I have another question. There's a moment where they emerge from the bamboo forest when they're coming up on the shrine, and Akane is like, oh, we're here finally. And they go out, and there's this beautiful sweeping meadow, and off in the distance you can see Mount Fuji, and it's gorgeous, and it's this breathtaking panoramic view. And the question this raised for me is something that I think the showrunners have been keeping from us on purpose, and it is exactly where spatially on the globe is this series of parks. They are so big that I don't know how you could hide one from the other. I mean, Mount Fuji is a giant effing mountain. It's a very big mountain, and you can see it from very far away. I'm assuming all the parks are in very close proximity, because the characters just take tunnels from one to the other. If that's the case, how do you not see Mount Fuji from Westworld? How do you not see Mount Fuji from the Raj? I think that we need to be asking that question. You can't hide Mount Fuji behind, a canyon wall. You just can't. One of the guests or one of the hosts is going to be walking through the prairie and, catch a weird angle behind a canyon wall and be like, oh, look, there's a mountain that's not supposed to be here. The fact that these parks are so close together really begs the question as to where they are, how you access them without seeing the others. How do you contain those worlds? And I'm starting to think there might be holograms involved here, that there might be, an invisible barrier kind of thing, and they're projecting some kind of panoramic graphic box that displays, a distant Mount Fuji. But if you get too close to it, then the illusion kind of gets distorted, and by that point, you're out of the park anyway. I don't know. That's the only way I can see them doing something like this, because otherwise, how do you do that? How physically does this park get made? And I think that the answer to that is going to be more important than we think. I don't think it's going to be just like an extraneous magic of television kind of thing where you're like, well, holograms and such. I think it's going to be a bigger deal when it gets revealed, whatever it is. I think that there's some fakery going on here. There's some illusion happening that has nothing to do with robots. There are rumors that one of the parks is supposed to be like a Blade Runner kind of thing, like Future World, because I think that was a thing back in the original movie. If that is the case, if one of these parks is Future World, I'm assuming that's a, giant metropolis, a huge cityscape with skyscrapers and flying cars or what have you. How do you hide that? How does somebody in Westworld not walk down, a prairie and turn their head and be like, hey, there's a city over there? How are these parks being hidden from each other physically and geographically? So old man William has finally been reunited with Emily, his daughter. And in what was probably my favorite scene of the episode, they're just sitting by the fire. They've made camp for the night, and William and Emily have a one-on-one conversation, and we find out more about what they're like. Emily seems to just want to reconcile and give her father another chance to be a father. She makes mention that she has been brought to the park ever since she was a little kid. Makes sense. I mean, if you were the granddaughter of Walt Disney, chances are you rode Space Mountain a few times. And now she's trying to get her father out and carry on with life outside the parameters of the park, however big they may be. And William seems taken by this. He seems a little bit touched, and he's like, yeah, you know what, maybe come first light of dawn, I'll follow you to the exit, and we'll just put this place behind us. And for a moment, I'm watching William, and he is genuinely moved that his daughter cares enough to, come all this way and remain in this dangerous place until she can get her father out. But at the same time, I'm sitting there thinking, he's not just going to walk away from his quest for the door just like that. And sure enough, the next morning, Emily wakes up at the crack of dawn, and William and his posse are already gone. They have skedaddled. They have moseyed on with their quest and left her behind, and she is not happy. I have a theory that the quest for the door, this is going to be very literal, but bear with me. I think that it does in fact involve him leaving and going off with his daughter. I think that, because just like the maze was a metaphor for, the bicameral mind and all that stuff. I think the door is Robert Ford literally showing William the door, saying, there's the door, please leave my park, please go on with your life and skedaddle. Because remember, he told William, the answers lie in your past, or something to that extent. A couple episodes ago, he said something about looking to the past, looking behind you to find the answer. What represents his past more than his daughter? I have a feeling that this is exactly what he was supposed to do, is he was supposed to go with his daughter and leave Westworld and try to lead a happy life in reality. Like I said, literally showing him the door. There's the door. Please go. And the fact that he turned it down and just went on his merry way says a lot about him. He's not a nice person anymore. But now I'm curious what the consequences are. If this is in fact the game, what are the consequences that he has now failed it? Because remember, the maze was not meant for him. It was made for the host. But the door was made especially for him. So if he fails at the door challenge, what does that mean? Is that going to end in his death? Is it going to end with him just being miserable? Is he going to be stuck in the park for, the rest of his life? How has Ford set up the consequences of this game? And I think we're going to find out next episode, but we'll get to that soon. Speaking of being reunited with daughters, guess who else reunited with her daughter? Maeve. She finally found her little girl. But like I said, this is not going to end well for them. Once they got out of Shogun World, Lee found the path back to Westworld, right where her old farmhouse used to be, and they go there and it's still the same, and there's the happy clotheslines, and they have their happy, super sweet memories. And Maeve walks over to the porch, and there's the little girl playing with her dolls. And of course, the little girl's on a new program. She doesn't recognize Maeve. To her, Maeve is a stranger. In fact, she's got a new mother. Another host is her mother now. And it's a very beautiful moment, and Tandy Newton plays it so well, and she's so sad and heartbroken, but at the same time so overjoyed to just see her daughter. Suddenly things take a weird turn, and the Ghost Nation shows up to attack the farmhouse, just like Maeve remembers them having always done. Except this time, Maeve interferes with the loop. She grabs the little girl and they run off into the wheat field there, and Hector and her crew start taking out the Ghost Nation people. And then one of the Ghost Nation riders comes up to Maeve and speaks to her and says, okay, you have to come with me. We're meant for the same path. And Maeve says, oh, your path leads to hell. And she's all pissed off, and she's speaking the Ghost Nation language. Now I have another question. When Stubbs got caught by the Ghost Nation at the end of season 1, he tried to verbally command them to cease their motor functions, but it didn't work. And at first I wondered, why doesn't verbal command work on the Ghost Nation? Is it because you have to speak their language? Because I wasn't sure if they had been awoken yet. But then again, they seem to be very spiritual, and the maze thing seems to be a part of their culture, so maybe they became self-aware before everybody else, which would be very cool. And if this whole time they've just been secretly self-aware and trying to break the constraints, but in their own unique way, maybe they're all already woke. And if that's the case, that whole thing about, we're on the same path, I can't even begin to imagine what they've been planning this whole time. But now it remains to be seen, how are they getting out of this situation? If they're taking the little girl with them, she's not going to see Maeve as her mother. The only way that she's going to see Maeve as her mother is if Maeve reprograms her. And Maeve doesn't want to do that. She doesn't want to mess with their own free will. So that's going to be a huge problem for Maeve going forward. That's going to challenge her the way nothing has challenged her yet. So we finally see what Dolores wants with the train. And yes, it is to go and rescue her father, but she has a very specific purpose in mind for the majority of the train, and it involves sabotage. They load the train up with explosives and set it on its way towards the mesa. It basically turns into a giant rocket, and it rockets toward the mesa and hits the entrance tunnel and explodes, and thus it creates a way for Dolores' team to get into the main hub. Now, Charlotte has at this point radioed for help. The first wave of help has come in. Delos has sent a team led by a very mean man. He's a big meanie. But that team is there with her now in the map room. But they heard the explosion, which means it's not far off, which means Dolores is not far off. So I can only assume Dolores' group is heading for a big confrontation with Charlotte's group. So they're going to go head to head, I think, and it's going to be really exciting. We know, though, that Charlotte's going to make it out alive, because we see her in the future talking to Bernard on the beach. Hopefully we'll get to see this thing with this buffalo that keeps charging out a window in the opening credits, because that's supposed to be a big deal, I think. We've seen promo images, too, of the buffalo is a thing. Apparently. It's a thing. So we'll be seeing it soon. But I can't wait to get Dolores' team in there and just see them kick some human ass. That's going to be a lot of fun. And Teddy's meanness is coming out full throttle. That reprogramming did a number on him, boy. And he is now cold-hearted. He gives one bullet to that tech dude and is like, that's all the mercy I have left, so don't waste it. He didn't quite do it that way, but you get the gist of it. And he's a cold-hearted dude now, and that's very sad because, you know, hashtag not my Teddy anymore. We got to see a brand new section of the park that we'd never seen before, the Cradle. And the Cradle is the central nervous system. It's if you will, it's the beating heart of Westworld. It is the giant room where all the hard data towers are, I don't know computer words, but those towers are all kept together, and it's kind of like every personality matrix in the park is in there somewhere. Elsie and Bernard go in there to find out what the hell is going on. I wasn't 100% sure what was happening here, but somebody was blocking requests for help or something when Elsie was checking the computer. There was some interference coming from within the park, and they couldn't find out who was sending it unless they went to the source, unless they went to the Cradle, which is exactly what they do. And Bernard sees this machine, and he steps into it, and he's like, hey, you know, if they take out my little processing ball there, my little CPU, my personality matrix or whatever it is, and put it in this machine, we can find out who has been sending these messages. He explained, like, when they were searching on the computer, we can see the messages, but not the messenger. So he goes into this machine voluntarily. They don't shut down his pain receptors because he says there's no time for that. And he just full on allows his skull to be cut open and has his thing taken out. No anesthetic. Ouch. And this was, for me, the most confusing part. Again, I don't understand computers all that well, so I really got to wrap my brain around what was going on here with Bernard and Elsie. But when Bernard allows his personality thing to be put into the Cradle, he suddenly emerges into this vision, this electronic vision, where he is in Teddy's shoes, which is very fitting considering the theories that are running around out there. And he's sitting on the train, just like the opening of episode 1, and he's just sitting there bumping along on the train, and the train pulls into Sweetwater, and he gets out, and life in Sweetwater is happening all around him, and it all seems very normal. And he looks stunned by this, and he's looking around, and he's like, what's happening? What's going on? And Dolores is there too, and she's being, you know, sweet Dolores, old Dolores. And he walks into the saloon, and somebody is sitting at the piano actually playing it. And we can see the reflection in the shine of the piano, and it is none other than Robert Ford. And he says, hello, old friend. And the episode ends there. Ford's presence makes a lot of sense to me, because Ford has popped up throughout the season, you know, possessing, for lack of a better term, hosts to speak to William. He did it with Lawrence's daughter. He did it with the character that Giancarlo Esposito played. He's been doing it for a while. And it makes sense that this would happen, because it looks like he has successfully done, in a sense, what they couldn't do with Mr. Delos. It looks like he has successfully uploaded his personality into the Cradle, into the network. And since he's in the Cradle, then he can potentially be inside any host. He has the ability to do so when certain, I guess, exterior triggers happen, you know, like such as William or what have you. Now I'm just anxious to know what he says to Bernard. That conversation is going to be great. It's going to be very philosophical, and it's going to sound like 14 fortune cookies being read all at once, but it's going to be great. So that was episode 6, Phase Space. And like I said, it was a slower episode, but it was full of setup. I can almost guarantee by next episode some confrontation is going to go down between Dolores' group and Charlotte's group, and I can't wait to see that. We don't know if Charlotte gets away with Abernathy at the end of the day. I have a feeling she might, because she looked pretty damn smug when we see her in the future on the beach. So unless there's still more conflict happening at that point in time, I have a feeling Dolores is going to lose this fight. And if that's the case, what's going to happen to her? Is she just going to escape? There's so many possibilities she could take and that her group could take, especially now that Teddy is no longer a huggable Teddy, but he's more like a grizzly. He's a grizzly. He should just change his name to Grizzly. But anyway, that's it for me this week. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I'll see you here next week. Until then, these violent delights have violent ends.